Hello, everyone, and welcome into today's Irish NFL show with me, Colum Cronin. And I am delighted to be joined by a good friend of the show and somebody I am fortunate to say is a friend of mine. At this point, we broke bread and shared pints together. Connor
Right.
Rogers, welcome back to the Irish NFL show. How are you doing, sir?
I'm great, man. It's always good to catch up with you, Colin, and it's better to catch up with you on Irish soil, but the video chat will have to work this time because it is football season, so I am back on United States soil working, man, but it's great to see you.
Yeah, and it's you've had an exciting time since we were last chatting. You have acquired a Madra, as we would say here. That is the Irish word for dog. Tell me and the listeners and viewers about Gracie.
Oh, what a gem she is. She's about 100 pounds. We adopted her a few weeks ago, so we're trying to figure out fully what she is. We were told, some Newfie mix, so that's where she gets her size, why she's almost 100 pounds. Some Border Collie, which you definitely see it in her face. But she's a mix. She's a joy. She's very sweet. She's a 5-year-old. She's well behaved. She loves running around outside, which really fits our DNA as well, as you've met Kristen and I. So it's been honestly maybe the best decision we have ever made, and I can't encourage people enough. If you have the resources, the time, you want to do it, look into adopting. You can really make a dog's life, and that's what they tell you, but the dog will actually make your life. That's the funny part in all of this. So it's been an absolute pleasure, man.
Yeah, no, she is beautiful, and I was doing the calculations when you put that the post up the other day about her being 100 pounds because I've got Sheriff who's part border collie, and Sheriff's about 40 pounds, about 19 kgs, and I was like 19 kgs, what is that? 40 pounds. I was like, oh my goodness, she would dwarf him.
Yeah, she's a monster. She's such a sweetheart too that she gets like timid around the 20-pound dogs that bark at her. But it is funny. We got the harness for her, so and she's pretty calm for that size, but it is quite hilarious that we're around her all the time. We kind of forget how big she is, but then you have some people that walk by and they're like, "Oh my god," and they always go, "He's huge," and I go, "It's actually a female dog." So yeah, she's huge. She's a big joy, a big sweetheart. I've had labs my entire life, so to have, something a little different, but just as friendly and sweet has been just as fun. And we're sprinting during football season too. So it's like she wakes me up real early in the morning. We get out, go to NBC, do the fantasy show, do whatever I do when I got to get home. I love this time of year. I love the running around. There's so much going on. It's so much fun. And now we get to have some fun as well.
Yeah, and look, we are obviously just as we're recording this on the cusp of week three. I suppose let's just kind of open the floor a little bit. Like, what are some of the things that have kind of captured your attention and that have fascinated you through the opening couple of weeks of the season thus far, Connor?
I'm always intrigued by the slow starts of teams that we expect to be, at least in the playoff picture, maybe even contenders. I think the team that is in that mold more than ever is the Cincinnati Bengals. And we've seen the Bengals get off to a slow start before, and no coincidence. It's, Joe Burrow doesn't have a summer, it feels like every year at this point to really, and you see a lot of the teams that didn't play their starters at all during the preseason, the slow starts, the offense not being in sync. Burrow's a little different, and this isn't different than what he's dealt with in the past, but he's playing through something, and Cincinnati just doesn't look right, and we know how good that team is. I actually thought that, and not shying away from this. It's 2 games; they could turn this thing around. But coming into the year, I liked them more than Buffalo, and Buffalo had a really tough week 1 against the Jets without pretty much without Aaron Rodgers. So there maybe, and yeah, they beat the Raiders, but Buffalo's another team you watch closely, especially with how good Miami looks in that division. You look at the Giants. Yeah, they're 1-1, but that doesn't tell the whole story of that team. They lose 40-0 week 1 against a division rival. They're being outscored 60-0 the first 6 quarters of their season. They have a great comeback, but it's against Arizona, so it feels a little uneven, a little bittersweet because a lot of people don't expect Arizona to win more than 2 or 3 games this year. So the Giants are a team, and as you and I sit here, and hang out and record this right before Thursday night football, you're trying to figure them out as well. It's, Kansas City loses Detroit week 1, but they're missing their 2 best non-Mahomes players. So week 1 and week 2 can lie at times, but you can also start to see some worrisome trends. So those are the things that I'm following most along the NFL right now is, what's a trend and a short-term trend and what's actually for real throughout this entire season.
Yeah, as I said, I mean the opening couple of weeks. I mean, it's interesting to look back, even say last year and the year before, and kind of see who was where were things like things seemed to have gone wrong in the first couple of weeks, and suddenly the team got it back. But equally,
Yep.
it started the slide for others, and I suppose kind of on that, like one of the teams that I thought would be kind of maybe kind of exciting this year, certainly, and kind of Trevor Lawrence could potentially be pushed for that MVP, but the Jags have really struggled offensively, particularly in the red zone. Is that something that has surprised you?
It has, because you look at they're loaded with talent, right? You have the return of Calvin Ridley, who goes absolutely bananas week 1 and then comes back to earth week 2. You still have Zay Jones there. You have Evan Ingram on a new extension, and he's kind of the steady Eddie of the offense. It feels like he's good for 5 catches every single week. You look at as they try to figure out everyone else in that offense, they try to make sure their line is right and the design of the red zone offense. You expect a coach like Doug Peterson, who has had success in that area in the past, to really be able to figure that out. And I don't know if the answer is to use Trevor Lawrence's legs more and have him threaten, and that'll open things up in the pass game. I don't really know what the answer is for them as a team as they try to gel with the new parts and keep the old parts in rhythm. So this is the good news for Jacksonville. I think quietly they have some young pieces on defense, especially when you look at the kind of player that Tyson Campbell is at corner. They have some talent up front. They have players on defense that are being slept on a little bit, that if the defense can play well and give the offense the time to kind of get in rhythm, because remember, they were really a second half team last year, too, when you looked at it. I remember the first year and a half through Trevor Lawrence's career, it was like year 1, Urban Meyer, throw it out. Then the start to last season, it was like, okay, when are we going to see the guy we expected as the number 1 overall pick? And then it all clicked for him, and he started to look like that kind of guy and that kind of player. So I'm not worried about Jacksonville right now. I think number 1, you want Travis Etienne to stay healthy. They'll get Tank Bigsby involved a little bit more as well. But the heart of the offense is the quantity of pass catchers that they have, and they got to find a way to keep everyone involved. And I think once again, Lawrence being a little bit aggressive on the ground as well on his own will open things up too.
And if we stick with the AFC, and maybe go back to the AFC North, because the Ravens, despite the injuries, have been pretty impressive, and we've seen Lamar take a significant jump in terms of getting rid of the ball quickly. What's he gone from 2.9 to 2.6, which it doesn't seem like a lot,
It's a
but
lot.
then you step back and you go, my goodness, it's a change, and despite the injuries, they're rolling.
They are, and I think you bring up a great point, Colum, is getting the ball out, and some of it is Lamar, and some of it is now Todd Monken is calling plays there and the structure of the offense where they're looking at it and going, okay, we drafted Zay Flowers in the first round. Let's get him those manufactured touches. Let's throw him the screens. Let's get him involved in the game, in the quick passing game, because we don't need him to be a player that the average depth of the target is so deep. That's why Odell Beckham was signed there, right? That's his role. Mark Andrews can do that as well. You can push the ball vertically and stress the back end of the defense with those guys. With Zay Flowers, you just want to get the ball in his hands as fast as you can, and he can make something happen. He can make guys miss. He can create his own yards. And they've already faced adversity by losing J.K. Dobbins for the year. They're used to playing without J.K. Dobbins, unfortunately. So now they're going to kind of roll with the Gus Bus and, of course, Justice Hill as well. The number 1 running back on that team, though, it's Lamar Jackson, and it helps when you have an MVP caliber player under center because he's such a dynamic threat throwing the ball and running, and he's somebody that can take over with his legs, and it also forces the defense to chomp down on him, and then he could beat you over the top with his deep passing as well. So, you look at the Ravens, I think that against the Texans, it was a little sloppy at times. They didn't need their A game or even their B game on offense to beat the Texans. Then you get a huge division win over the Bengals where the offense does look better. Lamar Jackson does make more plays. They're one of those teams now, as you look at the schedule, you would think they can take care of business against the guard. It's nothing against Gardner Minshew. He's a very good backup in this league, but the Ravens should take care of business against the Colts. I think the Ravens should win another division game after that against the Browns. And then at Ravens Steelers, I don't care where the state of those teams are, they always play each other really tough. But the Ravens look well equipped for a big time regular season and a big time, anticipation towards what their postseason will look like with their starting quarterback under center this time.
Now, one team who hasn't started well is my Broncos, and while things have changed a little bit on offense at times, we've seen Russ break out the moon ball. They defensively, it's a team that's really struggled. It's struggled to be explosive, especially defensively. But this week as well, we heard Sean talk about some of those communication issues, maybe needing to simplify the verbiage, maybe needing to bring in a wristband for Russ. Is this salvageable given the stretch? Now they got the Dolphins, then okay, they got the Bears, but they've a pretty brutal stretch after that, Connor.
You're right. That's the thing with them, right? You really wanted that win against, honestly, you wanted your first 2 games of the season to be wins. And if you can't go 1-1, now you start hitting the code red button, because it's every week 1 lies. You get, maybe you come out of the corner of the ring and you get punched in the face and you weren't ready for something. And then you recover and readjust for week 2. They didn't do that, right? They'd lose to the Jimmy Garoppolo led Raiders week 1. And, they made Jacoby Myers look like an all-pro player before he got knocked out of the game. And then you look at what Sam Howell did to that defense. I'm very surprised the state of the Broncos defense right now. I knew there would be limitations in the offense with Russell Wilson, who I don't think had a bad game against the Commanders. I like to see him running again. I think that was a positive. He almost had 60 rushing yards on just 6 attempts. But I think the problem is the defense can't play at this level and expect the Broncos to be any games, because they're not one of the powerhouse offenses of the AFC any way you slice it. And, we're trying to figure out, Colum, is Sam Howell for real, or is he capitalizing on teams that look really poor out of the gate? Because Sam Howell looked great against the Broncos. He looked efficient. He was hitting all his throws. He didn't make a lot of mistakes, or really any notable mistakes at all. They have good balance. I couldn't believe the way Brian Robinson was able to run against that Broncos defense. And I think that's what concerns me right now with Denver. If teams can establish the run against them, all that great playmaking talent they have on the back end is going to be left in a more vulnerable situation, as they have to allocate more defense to stopping the run because the guys up front aren't getting the job done. And, and you bring up a really good point. I mean, it feels like Sean Payton makes Russell Wilson a part of the news every chance he gets. And I get it, right? It's maybe not his guy. He wasn't there when they gave a ton of assets and money for him. I get all of that, but this is the job Sean Payton took. And the job description came with years of Russell Wilson, whether you like it or not. If you don't like it, well, then this wasn't the job for you. So I'm more curious to watch this team even outside of wins and losses. And right now they have 2 losses in 2 games and probably a third loss against the Dolphins incoming, maybe a get right game against the Bears. And then they play a Jets team that for no reason, Sean Payton pissed off the entire team. So this is a relationship between him and Russ that I'm really keeping an eye on, because I think Russ looks better this year, but it just is fascinating to me that Sean Payton continues to publicly challenge his quarterback. And I don't know if it's to keep eyes off of other deficiencies with the team, but I don't know if this is the year. It's easy to put things on Russ. I'm not ready to do that for the Broncos so far this year.
Yeah, I think being better, though, I would call that being taller than Danny DeVito contest.
It's very fair. It's a low bar, and he's not playing nearly up to expectations at all.
Can we go back just to dig into Sam Howell a little bit? Because obviously you cover college a lot, and Howell, I'm an absolute layman on college, but coming up to the draft, I kept denying it, and he seemed interesting because obviously, look, in his last year, from everything I understood, a lot of the weapons went, but this is a guy who appears to And don't get me wrong, like I'm not comparing him to Jalen Hurts, but he appears to have a sort of similar mindset in that he's obsessed with improving aspects of his game that maybe aren't as strong, and he really seems to have looked to do that. And it is, am I crazy for thinking that Sam Howell could, like, have a better pro career than Kenny Pickett?
It's a perfect way to put it up right now, right? Everybody is talking about, can Sam Howell keep a hold on this job for the long-term future of that franchise? And to me, the fascinating conversation, right, is Sam Howell the best quarterback in that draft? I mean, honestly, and the funny part is it's between him and Brock Purdy right now. It really is. Brock Purdy was the last pick in the entire draft. Sam Howell was the 144th pick in the 5th round. Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like I saw this coming with Brock Purdy, right? But with Sam Howell, it's almost puzzling that he fell to the 5th round pick 144. I thought I was low on him in that draft, and I had him 67th overall. I thought this guy was very worthy of somewhere on day 2 of the draft. If you liked his tools, you take him in the 2nd round. If you just needed a developmental guy, take him in the 3rd round. And he slides to the 4th, and you're like, how is this happening? Then he slides to the 5th, and it doesn't make any sense. And now he's an overachiever already for Washington, where the big arm is still there, the mobility and the desire to run. He's pretty fearless. He plays with a lot of heart and energy, and his teammates love him. He's obviously a guy that can lead. He's getting players like Terry McLaurin involved in the deep passing game, which is perfect for this offense. I think the threat of him off of play action is actually helping a guy like Brian Robinson in the run game. It's it's really interesting to me. Howell is a case of a guy that looked really, really good his second to last year at college. And then his final season, he lost some talent at UNC. The offensive line in front of him wasn't as good. He was pressured a lot more. He tried to be a hero at times and made a lot of mistakes, but the talent was still there. He was an incredible runner that final year of college. He could still push the ball down the field. He's got a big arm that he could throw on the move. He's very confident. He just lost talent around him. And if you wanted to knock him out of the 1st round because of that final college season, clearly I aligned with you, having him just in the top 70, not in the top 30. But you knock him down to the day 3 of the draft. I mean, what did the league miss here with this guy? He's already overachieved his draft slot if he never played another snap. But now we're in the conversation where Sam Howell might detract the Washington Commanders franchise from drafting a quarterback of the future in next year's draft. And I'm really, really happy for him. I'm really happy for fans of the Commanders. And it's a really fun storyline that Sam Howell is off to a hot start in his first year as the full-time starter there.
Yeah, and is that something, like, kind of sticking to the Commanders, but I'll go on a tangent a little bit about maybe the Rams. Like, in the off season, right? There was the stuff around Bieniemy, and people, it seemed like there was an immediate reaction, like things must be really wrong there. And I go back to, say, Matthew Stafford, when he came out and he said, I need to find ways to connect with the younger guys on the teams. do do we, like this is, I suppose, kind of acknowledging problems. Like Ron Rivera was essentially saying Eric Bieniemy has really high standards. It was a change. It sounded like that was a big change. Players are getting used to it, and it sounded like Stafford was maybe trying to acknowledge that there was an issue, and he was trying to find ways to solve it. Are we too quick to kind of jump on these things where people are trying to solve problems?
Colin, we live in a world of overreactions, right? It's almost like if somebody publicly announces a problem, it gets built up to be a bigger one rather than it's better than they announce it and try to get to the root of it. And you look at Stafford, that Rams team starts the year without Cooper Kupp. What does that mean for them? That means they need 2 really young receivers in Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell to take on roles that they never in a million years would have been expected right now. And maybe Tutu, because he was drafted on day 2 and he has been there longer. But Nakua having, 20 targets last week and excelling in it, I think it put urgency on those guys, and they have answered the call. When you look at Washington's offense under Bieniemy, operating with more urgency, playing with higher expectations, those guys have answered the call through the first 2 weeks of the season. They're 2-0 and they're putting up points. So it's fascinating, right? It's like sometimes when you just say the problem out loud, some guys react to that poorly and some actually react to it the way they're supposed to and address the problem. And the Rams young receivers are stepping up, and Stafford is playing incredibly well. Washington's offense is taking to a different style of coaching and a different scheme, and they look ready to roll out of the gate as well. So just because a problem is said out loud doesn't mean that it's going to mound into a bigger one or compound into a bigger one. I think it's had the adverse effect for both of those situations.
And I'm interested in your opinion on the Seahawks, because obviously week one they end up getting their asses kicked essentially in
Yeah.
many ways. But week two they find a way to come back against a Lions team. They're at home, that have a lot of expectations, have a hyped crowd. And yeah, there are defensive problems, but this again looks like a team that can score points. Is this like, do we again, and the overreaction? But this is the Pete Carroll modus operandi, right? Like they start out, they score points. They're always defensive problems, and Pete fixes this week 6, and the back end of the season they're gonna look serious business.
I think so. There are people forget this because they have veteran talent that takes the spotlight. Geno Smith, veteran, right? Tyler Lockett, one of the most consistent wide receivers in football. DK Metcalf at this point of his career, veteran. They have some guys on defense that have been around. But a lot of that team is parts trying to figure it out, right? A lot of young players. Kenneth Walker's in year 2, right? Jackson Smith and Jigba's a promising rookie. They've had injuries on their offensive line, and a lot of those guys were in year 2 anyway. That's a continuity situation. So week 1 felt like a lie with Seattle, and I said before that game, I'm not going to sit here and act like I knew the Rams were going to do that to them, but I said before that game, the Rams always give Sean McVay gives Seattle a hard time. I remember last year, the Rams gave them a scare towards the end of the season in a game they had no business even hanging around in. So sometimes a team just has your number, but that doesn't mean that it's going to doom you for the entire season. Seattle under Geno Smith. I mean, Geno Smith was QB5 in fantasy last year. That's how productive he was, and he doesn't get treated or viewed that way. And then he has a bad week 1 or a disappointing week 1, and then he looks like Geno Smith of last year in week 2. They are absolutely one of those teams that they are going to rally through this. They're going to figure it out. They can throw the ball. They can run the ball. The defense is going through some hurdles and some injuries, especially to their young corners. But on paper, when they are right, they are a scary team. And you said it. You have the oldest coach in the NFL. Him and Belichick are the oldest coaches in the NFL. It's not a shot at their age. It's actually a compliment to they've seen it all at this point, and they know how to adjust.
Pete Carroll is a wily old goat. I mean, he is.
Interesting cat.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There will be, probably by the time Pete is gone, and you can get 2 sources on the record. I can imagine the books that will come out. Um, as we begin to wind down, because you've been generous with your time. Like, who are some of the, maybe the players or the teams that have surprised you in a positive way, Connor, that you kind of they flew under your radar or our radars kind of in the off season, and all of a sudden now you're kind of like, they don't have to be superstars, but you're like, wow, they kind of caught my eye in the first couple of weeks. I need to keep an eye on this.
I think for me, we talked about the Commanders. They're definitely one, and we'll see if they can keep that going. A team that I wouldn't say I'm surprised by it, because I did think they would win their division, and they have a long ways to go. But I don't know if I thought it would look this good this early, is Atlanta to me. Atlanta to me, they're exciting to watch. They look well coached. They have, I took a little heat for this when I said it on Stock Exchange. I'm almost ready to call Bijan Robinson the best running back in the NFL. And a lot of people don't like that with McCaffrey healthy. And I get it, but I think he's that kind of difference maker already for them. They spent a lot of money on their defense. I'll say this, though. The problem is Baker Mayfield, I was not right about. He's surprising me. The Bucs are a little bit of a surprise right now. Mike Evans is off to a classic Mike Evans start. Baker looks good. The Saints aren't going anywhere either. They'll play, ugly, ugly football. But the Falcons, to me, they're the most exciting transition team in the league. They weren't, and a lot of this is going to be on Desmond Ridder, where they can go. They have a floor because they could run the ball and their defense looks better. But their floor is, or their ceiling is capped by what Desmond Ridder can and can't do. So that's why I have my eyes on the Falcons under Arthur Smith, to see how Arthur Smith can coach around that and to see if they can take hold of this division. That, I mean, listen, the top three teams, Falcons, Saints, and Bucks in this division, are all 2-0. The Panthers aren't going anywhere this year as they try to rebuild around Bryce, but this is a really interesting division.
Just on Arthur Smith, is Brandon Staley like the antithesis of Arthur Smith? Because whatever one thinks of Arthur Smith, he has the courage of his convictions. I think I tweeted on Sunday, like, the man carries his cojones in a wheelbarrow, right? And he's going to be ballsy, he's going to be aggressive all the time. Brandon Staley seemed to start out like that, and as soon as a few calls went against him and kind of the media got on his back, he got a bit of criticism. It's like he wilted, and he kind of second guesses himself, and so the team never really know where they stand. Whereas for the Falcons, they know their coach is going to go for it.
Listen, that's a great call out from you. It's been odd to watch Brandon Staley lose his comfort and who he was, and Arthur Smith is almost stubborn to the point where you just respect it. I mean, he gets asked after the game while Kyle Pitts and Drake London aren't involved, and he goes, "I'm glad we won." And you kind of look and you go, they won. And that question would be valid after a loss, but after they win, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Tyler Algier takes 2 touchdowns away from all those other guys. It doesn't matter. They run the football, and now they are playing defense, and they run what I call a training wheels offense because they want to take the game out of the quarterback's hands because they think they can win that way. And so far they have. So and Arthur Smith, I don't think, even if they hit a rough patch, he won't lose that. He is who he is. They built the team under who he is. While Brandon Staley, it feels like they haven't built their roster that way anymore. And he's starting to feel it, and he's losing who he is. And once you lose who you are, it's really tough to rebound from that. And that's why things are getting a little warm for Staley, why for Arthur Smith, everything's pointing upward.
Yeah, I mean, it is still early on. It is going to be intriguing to see how things play out over the next few weeks. Have you got anything in the works that we should be aware of? Where can people over here check out your stuff?
So we're doing Fantasy Football Happy Hour every Monday to Friday, 12 to 1. We're live on Peacock. It gets posted to YouTube and all podcast formats after. So if you're looking to talk literally fantasy football every day, Monday to Friday, we have you covered at NBC. I am doing the Big Ten film breakdown for them, looking at a different prospect every week. So if you want to get way ahead of the draft, that and NFL Stock Exchange podcast for PFF, man. I appreciate you giving me a little bit of a platform there to promote that. And Colum, it's always great to see you and talk to you, man. We always have a good time.
Connor Rogers, appreciate your time and continued success to you. And I look forward to hearing about Gracie's adventures again in the not too distant future.
Yes, you certainly will. She will be on Instagram. That is for sure.